Alright, hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Cahoon. I will be answering the Senior Seminar Test Final from Melissa Lee. Now, Melissa had several questions within her question. Her first one is, in regards to juvenile offenders, what is the best method used to deter the juveniles from becoming a repeat offender? Now, I do not think there's one best method in particular which works for every offender, just as every person, culture, and crime differs, so do juveniles. Some juveniles will respond very openly to rehabilitation, while others do not. However, there's a 2009 meta-analysis by Mark Lipsey titled Primary Factors That Characterize Effective Interventions with Juvenile Offenders, a meta-analytic overview. In this, Lipsey states seven main factors in lowering recidivism for juveniles. They are as follows: surveillance, which is close monitoring; deterrence, which deters reoffenses by dramatizing negative consequences. This can be done by either specific or general deterrence. Restorative programs, which repair harm done by offenders; restitution; and mediation, which is an apology by the offender in connection with the victims. Discipline, which are structured regimens. Counseling and its variants, which can take forms in individual counseling, family, group, peer, mentoring, or even a mixed schedule, as well as skill-building programs, which are behavioral, cognitive, social, academic, and job skill training. Multiple coordinated services also count as the seventh factor, which are case management, service brokers, and multi-module regimens. Lipsey states that all are influential to juveniles and all play a part in lowering recidivism. However, out of all of them, counseling interventions have the largest positive effects on decreasing recidivism by 13%. The next most effective are multiple coordinated services and skill-building programs, both which lower recidivism by 12%. The counseling interventions that were most effective were group-based mentoring-focused, and those that had mixed combinations of various types of counseling, whereas discipline interventions actually increased recidivism rates, and they had the largest negative offense with 8% recidivism. Deterrence interventions actually increase recidivism as well by 2%. Although this is just one study, it seems many people agree mentoring and counseling programs are the most effective in lowering recidivism. Thus, I think those should be more readily used as well. When a juvenile is subjected to a household that does not contour to a social norm, should this child be placed in state custody or reform school is Melissa's second question. Now, this decision completely depends upon totality of the circumstance, severity of the crime, risk factors, and previous offenses. All must be evaluated before appropriate placement. The court process to determine this is extremely difficult and different than in adult criminal courts and what most people often assume it is. Thus, I would like to go over a little bit of terminology on how exactly they determine if they're placed in state custody or in reform school. Now, there's two different things that can happen for a juvenile in the court processing. It is a citation or a diversion is a good place to start. If a citation is issued, it may either be informal or formal adjudication. Informal adjudication is common if a juvenile admits to a crime or pleads guilty, if the juvenile agrees to the disposition or a sentence in the juvenile terms, or if a juvenile completes all aspects of treatment, the case is considered resolved or dismissed. A formal adjudication has two forms. The first is a detention hearing or shelter care hearing. Detention is only for delinquent acts, or those acts that would be seen as criminal if done by an adult. Here the juvenile is a risk to the community or a risk of flight. Thus, the hearing must be held within 48 hours of placement in a detention facility. That placement is for rehabilitative methods as well. Not for punishment, as most people don't understand. A shelter care hearing is used when a juvenile is unruly or deprived of proper care. These hearings are usually held within 72 hours of placement in a juvenile shelter care facility, such as a group or foster home. The second aspect of formal adjudication is the first appearance on petition. Here, a petition is combined with complaints and sentence recommendations by intake officers. Thus, juveniles are not simply taken from homes and placed in areas. There are several steps to determine if a juvenile should be separated from the living environment and placed elsewhere. As far as incarceration goes, a juvenile can usually sway the emotions of a jury if tried in an adult court, depending on several factors such as age and crime committed, as the criminal process may lean towards a lighter sentence. However, the criminal punishments can lead to factors such as the labeling theory and other criminological theories, as well as excluding the juvenile from proper education and social development, they may actually be integrated into a prison life setting, which actually increases the rates of recidivism. The juvenile court, however, is informal and may also add an appropriate subjectivity to the case during intake. The amount in informal procedures may also work in the juvenile's favor, as they are less likely to be in prison or pay fines as an adult would. The juvenile also is more able to access, if I can talk today, rehabilitative methods, perhaps motivating them to pursue education. If placed in state custody, they may be better able to develop properly in a more stable environment the juvenile courts can administer. There are both positive and negative effects for each side of the systems for juveniles, and I strongly believe rehabilitative methods should be tried before any serious punishments be implemented. Therefore, to answer your question on should a child be placed in state custody or reform school, really depends a lot on totality of the circumstance, recommendations by intake officers, their crime, exactly what they did, and all of the other different things such as the shelter care hearing and the different processes that go with it determine whether or not they should or should not. So in my opinion, it's really totality of the circumstance. Now, for her third question, it is what forms of treatment or counseling is available to assist in development? Now, in my juvenile justice book from Minot State University, in my juvenile justice course, we had a book from Minot State University, which was The Juvenile Justice System, Delinquency Processing, and the Law. This book states several different methods for juveniles in both sentencing and rehabilitative treatments. Most concurrent methods to the previous questions and studies that we already learned about, although not always readily thought of in the court procedures, are foster homes, shelter cares, and halfway homes, which help rehabilitate the juvenile into a more suitable society, eliminating risk factors which negative environments may include. I also readily believe education is a key in juveniles' development, better helping them understand the world around them and aiding them to find a better place in society, both by helping them find a job and having more options than to just offend. Foster homes and shelter cares can bring good role models for the juveniles, lessening factors such as peer pressure as well as the need to offend. They also bring family connections which the juveniles may have previously lacked. This deters needs for, again, not only offending, but gang relations, as the most common reason juveniles join gangs is for a family relation and the feeling of the family, as well as protection. Several organizational groups, such as Big Brothers Big Sisters, also aid in helping a child develop more properly by setting a good role model. My favorite treatment option out of all of them listed, however, is camps, ranches, experience programs, and wilderness projects. These are primarily dealt with for less serious offenders or for youth who are involved in repeat offending, which obviously can greatly help lower recidivism if these are successful. These generally cost less than institutions and are designed to help improve juvenile self-worth, self-confidence, pride in others, and pride in themselves. They are mostly private and thus have fewer restrictions and guidelines, but this can be beneficial or negative depending, of course, on totality of the circumstance. These often build character and understanding, especially when involving animals. Animals themselves can be extremely therapeutic, and learning how to better work as a team and care for another living being can be detrimental and enlightening for those who are used to living in a neglected living environment. I actually wanted to show you my own horses and show you how I teach children how to ride horse and different therapeutic elements that go into teaching how to ride horse and dealing with horses. But unfortunately, the last few days in Bismarck, North Dakota have been extremely rainy and cold, and thus I'm not able to readily record. Now, the final question in Melissa's final project is how can we positively impact youth and create positive self-esteem, understand and adhere to the laws and consequences in society, and create a motivational aspect to the possibilities of what youth could potentially be capable of achieving. We can positively impact youth in many ways. Better educational programs and activities, especially for those who are in lower socioeconomic statuses, can help give juveniles better interests than in crime. Activities not only help juveniles find hobbies and meanings in life, but also give them a drive to do more. They aid with teamwork and self-esteem as well as social community relations. Better community relations, especially those by law enforcement, helps the juveniles understand that they have a place in the community. Additionally, is the social idea that getting counsel or getting help from psychologists and other certified counselors is negative, and that is something that needs to be changed. This is obviously far from true, and our society needs to understand gaining professional help is not negative in any way. It is extremely responsible and beneficial to the entire community. Juveniles often feel that if they go to help, they will be looked down upon, they will seem like they are weak, when it is exactly the opposite, and we need to have more courses and help them understand that it is not the case. If we readily use these more, I think juveniles would feel safe and understand the community, thus offending more often and gaining better morals. Next, I would like to state a more unpopular opinion, but one I feel it should be stated. Parents who raise juveniles often neglect them. They are drug users, they are verbal and physical abusers, they are not supportive to the juveniles in any way. However, our society feels parents, even the unqualified ones, should retain parental rights until the last straw or line has been crossed. But to what extent can that line go? As an advocate for Big Brothers Big Sisters, I have seen and heard this line crossed many times. The worst I have ever had to partake in here within is when an entire family of about 7 children were under Social Security care. The parents were under watch for drugs, neglect, and all other sorts of factors in the book. But social services, not security, waited until the eldest child, who was approximately 14 at the time, was sexually abused. Why should they wait? Why should we wait until these juveniles are traumatized? I understand both sides of the situation, as well as the fact that we lack qualified foster parents for these juveniles to go. However, there must be a better way and a better means of protecting the children before they are traumatized and before being led to this criminal and juvenile activity. I think there should be more parental guidance if a family is under social services care. Restrictions such as restrictions on food stamp purchases may seem a little off, but when you really look at it, if we regulate them buying more healthy foods rather than junk foods, that could better help a juvenile or even just a child's mental and physical development. Regulating that they are buying clothing or other hygiene necessities and other factors could eliminate money that is actually spent on drugs, which is a very common problem actually in a lot of those who have assistance, especially for those who have more children. Requirements such as counseling for parents as well as parental guidance courses I think should be required, or at least highly suggested, especially for those who have several children or problems with their children, and then that way they can really know how to best parent and better how to not only gain better moral character in themselves but in their children as well. During my internship at the Bureau of Investigation, I have seen parents with dirty needles readily accessible to their children. It is disgusting. I've heard stories from the North Dakota State Penitentiary about families with children and how the fathers don't think that their neglect is a problem. Perhaps the problem, again, is not with the child, but with the parent who raises them. A stronger focus on what the child is learning at home rather than at school could be detrimental for deterring criminal activity. For example, if a child is learning not to do drugs at school, but then goes home to their methamphetamine-addicted parents, they're more likely to partake in drug activity. And the parental activity will have a greater influence on the actions of the child than that at school. Parents, after all, are the largest role models in a child's life and are the centerpiece of development, according to several psychologists such as Sigmund Freud, Piaget, and Erik Erikson. This development with parents not only affects mental activity but physical development as well. My favorite out of all of these theories are Erik Erikson's famous psychosocial theory, which has 8 stages of development and all through a person's lifetime. In this theory, every stage contains a crisis between 2 factors a person experiences at approximate ages. If the crisis is not resolved, it deters development from that point on. The first stage takes place when a child is born to approximately 1 year old. Here, if a child does not connect with his or her parents, there is a crisis concerning trust. Trust versus mistrust is extremely important and determines how a person connects with others in the community for the rest of their lives. In Erikson's theory, 5 of 8 stages are formed by parental and peer relations. So the connection with a healthy environment is detrimental to a juvenile and other children. I would also like to add that psychologically, our adolescents partake in less juvenile activity and are less depressed if they live within a healthy, supportive family. Children to parents who show love in a strong family relation also test better in school, are in more activities, and have higher self-esteem. This concludes my final presentation for Melissa Lee's question. Thank you for all listening, and good luck with your finals. I hope you all have a wonderful day and enjoy your graduation.